On the 7th of November 2020, the Spirit Specialist opened its doors, well, door, to the public for the very first time. Just a few days after the UK went into a second lockdown, I launched a new retail business offering some of the world's most exciting spirits to a general public who basically couldn't leave the house. From day one, I always said that if I could make it to a year operating with the door still open and some money still in the bank, even if it was just a fiver, I could consider that a success. And so here we are, just a couple of weeks away from the shop's first birthday. To celebrate this anniversary, I'd like to present you my nominations for the Spirit Specialist Spirits of the Year 2021, those particular bottles that have stood out for me personally. Every single product sold in the shop I sample before bringing it in to ensure it's of a high standard and good value to you, the customer. And given the time of year, maybe these nominations will give you some ideas for presents in the run up to Christmas, or even just a little treat for yourself. On the weekend of our first birthday, I'll upload a new video in which I announce the winners. But for now, here's the nominations for the American Whiskey of the Year.
Hello there. Ben Bowers, Spirit Specialist, and I'm going to give you the nominations for the American Whiskey of the Year. Now, I'm a big American whiskey fan, big bourbon fan, possibly as much of a fan of American whiskey as I am of Scotch, which technically is my first love, but I think I probably prefer American whiskey more. Controversial. So naturally, I had to do American whiskey as a separate category for my Spirits of the Year, because there's too many of them and I love too many. So the very first nomination for American Whiskey of the Year is Angel's Envy Kentucky Straight Bourbon Whiskey finished in port wine barrels. It's probably not a surprise for some of you to see this as the nomination. This is one of my all-timers. It took me about 6 months to actually get the bottles in stock, because when I opened I wasn't even aware that they were actually now exporting to the UK. Arguably one of the best looking bottles out there. Not sure if you're going to be able to see the wings through the bottle. It's such a good whiskey. This is one of the first bourbons I ever bought, and I've loved it ever since. It looks beautiful. It tastes absolutely brilliant. The port finish, the port influence from the barrels that it's been finished in just works for me. I'm a bit of a sucker for whiskies that are finished in port barrels. That rich fruit, red berry element, that kind of like thick, dark fruitiness that you get through, for me works with whiskey generally, but American whiskey almost even more so. I love the balance of this. Now, for some people, this is a little bit too soft and a little bit too sweet, and I get that. But for me personally, it's an absolute stunner. If you want a bourbon that is on the easier drinking side and you want a fruitiness to it, and you want one that will work in an old fashioned, but will drink so well, like almost too easily as a neat sipping whiskey, this is absolutely the one for you. Now, hopefully next year, their rye, which I was sent a sample of by a good friend of mine, will be available in the UK, because as good as this is, and as much as this was in my probably top 5 whiskies of all time, I tried the rye a couple of weeks ago and I actually think it's better than this. So if that becomes available in the UK, this is up there. This is one of my nominations for American Whiskey of the Year. The rye is definitely going to be a nomination for Whiskey of the Year, provided I can actually source it and sell it in the shop. So that's nomination number 1. The second nomination is Belmont Farm Virginia Whiskey. So this nomination is almost not just for the whiskey, but for Belmont Farm as a whole, and more so Chuck and Crystal. Chuck, the distillery owner, and Crystal, his daughter. We did a Belmont Farm tasting earlier this year, and they dialed in from Virginia. Wonders of technology. There was a couple of people on the Zoom call that are good friends of mine who are very much Scotch drinkers, but they joined because they were kind of looking at, getting into American whiskey and finding out a little bit more. So they were kind of reluctantly joining in, but they was like, yeah, we'll buy a ticket, we'll get the sample pack, that sort of thing. And he texted me through Facebook Messenger. I was trying to concentrate on the screen and have an introductory talk with Chuck, etc., etc., and he was giving us the background information. And this messenger pinged up. And he said, it was a good friend of mine who said, I love this guy, I'm already buying some bottles. And we'd been on the tasting for about 5 minutes. One of the most characterful, engaging, passionate, funny people I've ever met. And Crystal, his daughter, was so lovely, and she really was like the steadying hand on him, just the stories he was coming out with. And I've met some people that have done other tastings with him where they've had different stories to what he told us in terms of just through his life. So if you get the chance to do a bit of Googling about Chuck Miller, who is the founder of this, just incredible stuff. Grain to glass, they are growing the corn, the rye, the barley, everything that goes into the whiskey. So the Virginia whiskey is what would be a bourbon, but for the fact that they they have a big Hessian bags that are filled with applewood staves that they then dump into a vat full of their new make spirit. They leave in there for about a week before they then put it into a cask. So if it wasn't for that element, that addition of those staves being rested in there, then they could call it a bourbon. And they do a bourbon. They do the bourbon as well. But weirdly, the applewood stave element, that addition of wood just sitting in there, soaking in for a little bit, I think makes this a little bit more interesting. There is a slight fruitiness to this compared to the bourbon, and that is the only difference between the two, is this big Hessian bag with staves in it. I've got the range down here. I'm not sure if you'll be able to see it. No, you can just see the tops on the screen, but they do a butterscotch whiskey, where it is literally the Virginia whiskey they put into a vat, they tip a load of hard butterscotch candies in, essentially like Werther's Originals, let them dissolve, put it in a cask, let it bottle it up. You know, that's how you make your butterscotch whiskey. Apple whiskey, you just get really super concentrated apple juice, add that to your whiskey, bottle that up. Dead simple, no mucking about, no flavorings, no kind of like artificiality or anything like that. If you get to see pictures of the distillery, it's like so old school. It's an absolute maze. It's a health and safety nightmare, but it works. So yeah, if you're ever in Virginia and you get the chance to visit the distillery, do so. And if you get to meet Chuck in person, I'd love to meet Chuck in person. I'd very much like to just spend hours with him, just listening to him talk. And the whiskey itself is fantastic. This is my go-to now for an old-fashioned. I think it's a great sipping whiskey, but it's got enough character, it's got enough bite that in an old-fashioned, it works so well. So Belmont Farm, Virginia whiskey, but to be honest, the entire range could be in the nominations for this. I had to pick one, so it's this one, which is kind of their house whiskey, as it were. Is just a deserved nomination for everything that surrounds it, not just for the liquid itself. So the third nomination is CATOCTIN Creek Roundstone Rye Whiskey Distiller's Edition, 92 proof. So another relatively small scale distillery, husband and wife team, and this is one where I did, if you get the chance to look at the other videos, I've done the range of 3 that they have over here in separate videos. So we've got the 80 proof, we've got the 92, and then we've got the cask proof as well. So this is 46% ABV. And the 80 proof is a really good introduction to rye whiskey, but it's not sharp, but it's, you know, it's youthful, and I have had that on a few tastings, and there's been a few people that's gone like, oh, it's a bit kind of on the petrol-y side, or it's a bit fiery for me personally, and all this lot. But once you get to the Distiller's Edition and the cask proof, all of a sudden that youthfulness develops into an incredibly complex flavor profile, where there's notes of like toasted brioche, you've got orange peel, you've got dark chocolate, you've got orange oil, there's a fruitiness in there, there's a chocolatiness in there. It's absolutely amazing. And whereas the 80 proof is, I would probably say, much better for cocktails, old fashions, that sort of thing. The Distiller's, the cask is amazing, but I think for the price point, the Distiller's absolutely nails it. I think it's amazing value for money. I think the complexity is there for you know, a sipping whiskey. I feel like I'm going to sneeze. I told you I was going to sneeze. The complexity that's in here, but it still has enough bite and everything like that that you could put it into an old-fashioned or a Manhattan or something like that if you wanted. It would be a really bloody good Manhattan as well. But just as a whiskey on its own, I think this is stunning. I love what CATOCTIN Creek are doing. I think they're a fantastic distillery. Another one of these craft distilleries that are actually proving themselves in the liquid as well. So that is why I'm putting this as a nomination, and well deserved. And the fourth and final nomination is Sheepdog Peanut Butter Whiskey Liqueur. Yes, this is a nomination. And you're probably thinking, right, well, all respect I have for you, Ben, has now gone. What little there was already. What the F are you putting this in for? Now, this is one of the most fun bottles I've had this year. The supplier mentioned that this was coming out. I said, yeah, I'll give it a go. Send me a sample. I'll try it. I'll see what it's like. Because if it's good liquid, I'll have it on the shelf. Wasn't expecting to get a full bottle. Was expecting just to get a miniature. But the full bottle that I got as a sample enabled me to then play around with it, because it tastes of peanut butter. It does what it says on the tin. And then I ended up playing with it going, right, well, I want to make an old fashioned with this, but I want to make a PB&J old fashioned. So I was then playing with like strawberry jam, black pepper vodka from Sheffield Distillery. Didn't really work. I've got a wild strawberry liqueur from Italy. It didn't really work. I was playing around with various flavors to try and get that PB&J element for about a week. And it was great fun. Really experimenting with it, playing around with it. Eventually, Esprit de Figue liqueur. Fig liqueur gives you that kind of grape jelly feel, plus the peanut butter, to make an amazing peanut butter and jelly old fashioned. The reason this is a nomination is this is fun. And I've had more fun with this than anything else, nearly anything else in the shop. So you can be all hoity-toity about this is not proper whiskey. I know it's not a proper whiskey. I know it's not like, you know, a serious American whiskey that's kind of like you can drink with a cigar or anything like that, and it's not been aged and blah, 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 blah. I know that, but I've had more fun with this through the year, sharing it with customers, sharing it with friends, sending samples off and going, try that, see what you think. And more people have come back and going, actually, yeah, it's all right, you know? It's way better than I thought it was going to be. It tastes of peanut butter. I really like peanut butter. I really like this. Yeah, I'll buy a bottle. This, knock it all you want, but my word, I've had more fun discussions and more interest about this than a lot of whiskies in general and spirits in general in the shop, which probably isn't saying much about me as a person. But that is why this is a nomination, because this has been one of the most memorable things I've tried all year, and I think it is absolutely deserved. Now, if it wins, I think I'll probably get some comments, but that's the way it goes. But there's enough shit going on at the moment, and since I've opened the doors, that to get worked up about this, there's better things to be worried about in your life, to be honest. So that is why that's the fourth and final nomination. So that's the American Whiskey of the Year nominations. I will let you know which one the winner is. Might be this. At the final video, which will be uploaded around the weekend of our first anniversary, which is on the 7th of November. There are other videos, which will be the other nominations for the other categories that I've got. You may have seen quite a few of them already. If you haven't, go and check them out. And I'll hopefully see you on the finals very soon. Cheers.